Focus on Headline. All right, let's take a look at what major issues are making the headlines today on Focus on Headline. For this, joining us in the studio today, we have our reporters in Han-dan and Yoon-hae-jung. Guys, welcome back.
Good evening.
Good evening to you guys, and a very hot Wednesday to you guys as well. It is the peak of summer season. We have, of course, President Yoon Suk-yeol beginning his week-long summer vacation starting today. He's expected to spend most of his time at the presidential retreat on Jeodo Island off the south coast. Tanya, you're going to start us off with his vacation plans.
Right. President Yoon began his 7-day summer vacation. The presidential office confirmed that President Yoon did not head to his office in Yongsan today as he is on leave for the summer holiday. He was due to take a vacation earlier this month, but was delayed due to the torrential downpours that wreaked havoc across many regions. The president and First Lady Kim Gun-hee are expected to spend most of their time away from Seoul at the presidential resort in Jeodo Island in Koje, located in South Gyeongsang Province. The resort in Jeodo is known to have been first designated as the presidential villa by former late President Lee Seung-man in 1954. President Yoon took 5 days off last summer, but stayed at his private home in Seoul's Seocho district, so this marks his first visit to the presidential villa. The first couple is also expected to visit various other provincial cities outside the capital region, making surprise visits to traditional markets. And this as President Yoon aims to boost domestic consumption and help revamp Korea's slowing economy. The presidential office explains President Yoon will not only take some rest to recharge, but also devote a lot of his time on future policy planning. He plans to be briefed on the poor construction of apartment complexes built by state-run Korea Land Housing Corporation, as well as on parties and individuals involved in the contracts, which President Yoon labeled as the privileged cartel. The government has launched a safety inspection on apartments constructed by local builders under a contract with LH, following a collapse of a parking lot at an LH apartment in Incheon caused by lack of reinforcement bars. They refer to steel bars used in concrete structures to increase the overall structural integrity. President Yoon is also widely expected to review a small-scale reshuffle during his time off. Heads of 2 to 3 ministries, including science and industry ministries, are expected to be replaced after the president's summer holiday. The presidential office says although details are yet to be fixed, a rough outline of the reshuffle is expected during the president's summer break.
You know, it's what comes with being a president is you never really do enjoy your summer vacation. There's a whole lot of work that still goes into during the summer vacation if you are, of course, the president here. We're going to move on as we've been sort of talking about and extensively covering the issue over teachers' rights. This following the very tragic story of a 23-year-old elementary school teacher over at Seoul Elementary School in Seochegu District taking her own life, allegedly because of harassment from parents of these students. Now, as we've been mentioning, the government has been pushing to make some changes to make sure that teachers are protected. Now, parents in Seoul, they will be required to make a reservation before meeting or talking on phone with teachers in order to prevent teacher harassment. Hae-jung, let's get the latest on this.
Sure. In the wake of the suicide of a young teacher, teachers' call for protection from abusive parents and students is gaining more and more public attention. So in response, Cho Hee-yeon, superintendent of the Seoul Metropolitan Office of Education, said today that an experimental advanced reservation system will be adopted at schools in Seoul next month in order to lessen teachers' burden stemming from parents' complaints. Now, under the pilot system, parents wanting a meeting or a phone call with teachers are required to make a prior reservation on a special app, and a chatbot will deal with general complaints from parents. And in line with the plan, the Education Office will also launch a pilot project to install camera-monitored waiting rooms in some schools starting September, and parents who want a meeting with teachers will be required to wait in this room. The office will also expand a plan to replace teachers' school telephones with new ones with a voice recording function to better deal with abusive parents and malicious complaints. And other measures by the Office of Education include providing legal fees for teachers in case of disputes over infringement of teaching rights without the need for a resolution by the School Teachers' Rights Protection Committee. Now, previously, teachers had to go through the review and decision of the committee to receive support for legal fees, but now they can receive support by submitting documents that confirm the outcome of the case, and the Seoul Metropolitan Office of Education is promoting the enactment of the Education Activity Protection Ordinance as a part of this effort. Also, the dispute mediation service will also be strengthened to mediate between parents and teachers before they go to court. And starting March next year, the number of mental health professionals visiting schools and specialized counselors for elementary schools will be increased as well.
I mean, really shows you there's a whole lot of problems, and teachers are going through a whole lot when you're talking about mental health professionals visiting schools. But I've always mentioned this before, but in some other countries, I know there are some other countries out there that where teachers' phone numbers are available to the parents. Like, these are one of those things, again, I still, to this day, it's something that I don't understand, because growing up in the U.S., you're not allowed to even look up teachers' phone numbers on phone books and things like that. And in fact, some teachers, you can sign up to be not included. Okay, so I'm talking about the days when phone books were around, back in my days, and you can look up numbers and stuff like that. Teachers, they all request that their numbers be not listed on the phone books in order to, so that they don't get any calls from parents or students, who want to prank call them or anything like that. So the system has always worked for them over in the U.S. Why not put in a system here in South Korea? And especially in the elementary, as I mentioned, parents tend to really get into the business in what they believe is over the protection of their own child. But again, we keep talking about this harassment that they go through. And why did it take the life of a teacher before these moves, these changes were made? Because problem have existed long before, but still, though, better late than never, and good to see that we're making small changes here and there. Let's move on here. The government moves to lower the infectious disease class of COVID-19 to the same level as the seasonal flu. We had a talk with Professor David Kwok just yesterday from level 2 to level 4, I believe, and health authorities are now carefully reviewing the timing of the pandemic class adjustment. This still, though, as we talked about, daily COVID-19 cases are surging to nearly 50,000. But the problem is, as we mentioned, not a lot of people are getting testing done, and the figure should be a lot higher than the 50,000 here. And these are, of course, numbers last seen during the winter season. Tan, what's the latest on this?
The commissioner of the Korea Disease Control Prevention Agency, Ji-young-mi, said today that the government will decide the timing of adjusting COVID-19's infectious disease level after careful monitoring of the pandemic situation and thorough discussions with experts. The government began scaling back quarantine measures in June this year as the number of new cases and severe cases both declined to manageable levels. And it now plans to lower the infectious disease class of COVID-19 to the same level as the seasonal flu and implement its second phase of daily recovery measures from next month. Administrative procedures are currently underway for an official notification of COVID-19's downgrading of disease level, and the government plans to announce the details of the second phase recovery measures next week. The measures are widely expected to include lifting all remaining indoor mask rules, suspension of government's official tallies, and cutting state support for COVID-related medical expenses. Amid signs of another possible big wave of COVID cases, though, KDCA Chief Ji-young-mi said authorities are reviewing the scope of lifting indoor mask rules, factoring in protection of high-risk patients. She assessed that although COVID infections are back on the rise due to weakened immunity and eased restrictions, the possibility of the coronavirus posing a serious threat to the society is low. But she added government is yet to completely declare COVID-19 an endemic, projecting Korea to see one or two small and big waves of cases each year, at least for the next few years. On the threat of COVID variants that are becoming more immune evasive, the KDCA said the fatality from Omicron subvariant XBB remains low. Commissioner Ji-young-mi explained that the threat of COVID-19 is now similar to that of the seasonal flu for healthy people, but antivirus restrictions are still needed for high-risk groups with weak immunity. She recommended those groups to wear masks in crowded spaces and on public transportation and stick to the 5-day isolation when testing positive to protect your families, your colleagues, and all the others around you. The daily average of COVID-19 cases in Korea jumped to over 45,000 last week. Cases have been on the rise since the end of June and spiked recently as the country marked the peak of the summer vacation season.
Yeah, I think we've sort of officially transitioned into the endemic phase because just judging by the way that people are kind of treating the COVID-19 right now, it really is kind of like, and a lot of the symptoms, of course, some people are saying that it's even less than the flu. I've gotten the flu before. I've had it worse than the COVID-19 back last year, but at least there now is treatment. There are vaccines available, just like the flu. The only difference, I think, is that while flus are usually seasonal, right? You see it during like the winter time, and for some odd reason this year around, we have it during the summer as well. COVID-19 is something that kind of all year around. It's just the fact that it just kind of spikes in certain times. So certainly it does seem right now South Korea is, or I should say the rest of the world is really treating COVID-19 like the influenza at this time. Let's move on, talk about the economy. And this is quite concerning because South Korea's per capita GDP fell 8.2% last year. This is the third largest decline among major economies. Haejung, let's get more on this.
Right. Last year, South Korea's per capita gross domestic product showed the steepest decline among major economies after Japan and Sweden. Korea's per capita GDP dropped 8.2% on year at $32,142 in 2022, according to the data analyzed by the Bank of Korea based on the reports of OECD and the World Bank. This was the third sharpest decline among 47 major nations that include the world's top 30 economies and OECD member countries, where Japan recorded a 15.1% fall and Sweden an 8.5% decline. And South Korea ranked the world's 23rd in terms of per capita GDP in 2022. Luxembourg topped the list, followed by Norway, Ireland, Switzerland, and the United States. Other countries competing with South Korea include Italy, which came in 20th, Japan 21st, and Russia 22nd. Now, South Korea's sharp fall last year was attributable to the weakness of the Korean won against the US dollar. Now, in terms of local currency, South Korea's nominal GDP rose 3.9% on year to 2,161.8 trillion won, which is roughly $1.68 trillion. But the dollar-based figure marked a 7.9% on-year fall, or the second largest decline among major nations in the world. On average, the local currency was traded at 1,291.75 won against the US dollar in 2022, which was a 12.9 increase compared to the previous year's numbers. Bank of Korea Governor Lee Chang-yong also explained at a press conference last month that Korea experienced a significant depreciation of the won against the dollar last year due to rising oil prices, but Brazil, Russia, and Australia, which ranked higher than the previous year, had no exchange rate impact because they are energy producers and exporters. Now, at the same time, it seems that Korea's economic growth engine is gradually weakening, as last month, the IMF raised its global economic growth forecast for this year by 0.2 percentage points to 3%, but lowered its growth forecast for Korea by 0.1 percentage point to 1.4%.
Yeah, and this figure is quite concerning because South Korea is now not on par with the global growth. And again, the currency rate is a big factor because Japan as well, if you look at the yen has been tanking for the past year or so. So it's really kind of almost unfair at times because, we base everything on the U.S. dollar. So if the U.S. dollar is stronger and while we're not getting paid in U.S. dollars, it just seems like we're getting paid less and less. But these are quite interesting figures. But again, we are going to look at some other concerning economic figures here because South Korea's price growth slowed for the 6 straight months, remaining in the 2% range here. Inflation, these are all good news, but we have other, a negative news that we'll talk about. Inflation cooling because oil prices dropped at the fastest pace since the government's first data. Now oil prices are going back up here. We'll have to see what kind of data we'll see next month, but let's break this down for us.
Right. South Korea's consumer price growth slowed for the 6th straight month in July to the lowest level in 25 months. The drop was mainly driven by lower oil prices, with petroleum prices in particular plunging at the sharpest rate since the government's first data in 1985. Prices of diesel fell 33%, while those of gasoline and LPG dropped nearly 23% and 18% respectively. According to Statistics Korea, consumer prices, a key gauge of inflation, rose 2.3% last month from a year earlier, compared with a 2.7% increase in June. This marked the lowest gain since June 2021. Core inflation, excluding volatile food and energy prices, rose 3.3% on year, down from a 3.5% increase tallied in June. The prices of utility services continue to grow sharply, advancing over 21% following electricity rate hikes. Prices of industrial products remained unchanged in July as the drop in diesel and gasoline prices offset gains. The service sector gained over 3% on year due to higher insurance and house management costs. Prices of daily necessities, the 144 items closely related to people's everyday lives, such as food, clothing, and housing, climbed nearly 2% on year, slowing from a 2.3% jump in June. Prices of agricultural and fisheries products climbed 1.7% on month as prices of fresh vegetables surged 7% due to torrential downpours. But the figure actually marked a 0.5% drop from last year, and this is because of the base effect caused by a sharp rise in agriculture and fisheries prices due to severe heat waves last summer.
Yeah, the reason why I said it was a concerning figure, despite the fact that it's on a dip for the 6th straight month, is because there is a overemphasis on the price of the gas, right? The fuel prices. And we've been seeing, and I think we're going to be talking about this in one of the days on one of our segments with an expert, but oil prices have been skyrocketing once again, and even diesel prices are surpassing 1,500 won per liter. And this is going to, again, lead to a rise in consumer prices come next month, is the consensus, not to mention the heat wave. We had the long, massive downpour really affecting the agriculture. And surely right now, with now all of a sudden a lack of rain and a whole lot of heat, is certainly going to impact the agricultural prices going into this month. And so we can probably see that the consumer prices are going to start climbing it back up when we see the data come July 1st. Sorry, not July 1st. September 1st is when probably the data is going to come in. Let's move on here. Other concerning news. We're talking about the weather, the climate. It certainly has been out of whack these days. We were saying how yesterday I believe 35 degrees Celsius was the daytime high in Seoul, which was the highest recorded so far in Seoul for this summer. Many parts of South Korea reporting as high as 36 degrees, even here in the capital, Seoul, as well, so surpassing yesterday's highs. Heat warning level remaining at the very highest level of serious. Haejung, do tell us about the weather. How hot was it? Because I felt it.
Well, according to the Korea Meteorological Administration, the highest daily temperatures were 35 degrees Celsius in Seoul, 33 in the nearby city of Incheon, and 36 degrees Celsius in the southern cities of Gwangju and Daegu. Now, apparent temperatures, which measures the temperature the body actually feels, surpassed 35 degrees almost across the entire nation. And the previous day, the government raised its heat wave warning to serious, the highest level in the 4-stage warning system system for the first time in 4 years. A serious level alert is issued when daily high temperatures remain at 35 degrees Celsius or higher in many parts of the country for at least 3 days, or when daily highs remain at 38 degrees or higher in some parts of the nation for at least 3 days. And not just the temperature, but the level of ultraviolet radiation was very high across the nation around noon as well. Of course, such high temperatures can be attributed to climate change. Now today, the Korea Meteorological Administration released the heat stress index forecast by different scenarios. Now the heat stress index refers to the wet bulb globe temperature, which is a measure of the heat stress in direct sunlight, which takes into account temperature, humidity, wind speed, sun angle, and cloud cover, which is also closely related to the number of heat illnesses. From 1979 to 2014, Korea's summer heat stress index was 28.1 degrees. But under the climate change scenario, which assumes heavy use of fossil fuels, Korea's index is expected to rise to 35.8 degrees in the second half of this century. But the index is also projected to rise to 31.2 degrees if renewable energy technologies are developed to minimize the use of fossil fuels and achieve environmentally sustainable economic growth.
So even if we change the renewable energy technology, it's still going to climb well over 30 degrees is what we're seeing. Again, I mean, there are still people out there for some reason who don't believe that there is a climate change going on, that there is climate crisis right now globally. Because one of the most frightening figures that I saw just last month was the fact that July 2023 was recorded as the hottest month in the world in the past 120,000 years. I don't even know how you get data from 120,000 years, but still, if scientists say it is the hottest, I think the World Meteorological Organization said something like this. And the difference is, I believe, in the previous high, which was not too long ago, a couple of years, is significantly higher this year. And as we've been seeing, the trends that we've been seeing is it's just getting hotter and hotter and hotter each year. And some of the places have already been places that have never recorded 40 degrees during the summer, recording 40 degrees. I feel like South Korea eventually will come a day when it's going to be 40 degrees. And already, 35, 36 is just ridiculously hot. And change needs to be made sooner or later. Let's talk about, because of these high heat, there's been concerns. What's interesting is yesterday we talked about this World Scout Jamboree on our tech segment, because I thought it was weird that scouts are doing all these things with technology, using AI and robots and stuff like that. But this is the biggest camping festival for young people, and this began on Tuesday in Korea's North Jeolla province. We were talking about safety and security and so forth. One thing I think we didn't take into consideration is the high heat right now, because the extreme heat wave is hampering their adventures. Hundreds of patients were reported, many of whom suffered heat-related illnesses. Tan, you have more on this.
Right. Over 400 heat-related illnesses were reported on the first day of the 25th World Scout Jamboree taking place in Saemangum along the country's southwestern coast in North Jeolla province. According to the Jamboree Organizing Committee, over 800 attendees at the campgrounds showed various symptoms, 400 of whom were confirmed as patients with heat-related illnesses. The committee, however, stressed that there have been no major setbacks to the event, saying that emergency and healthcare services are being provided for those experiencing symptoms. The organizers have enhanced indoor cooling systems, expanded shuttle bus operations, and plan to add up to 150 hospital beds at emergency facilities. Talks are also underway between the committee and the World Organization of the Scout Movement to adjust activities accordingly, and also on ways to prevent further heat-related illnesses. Southwestern coastal county of Busan, where the Jamboree is taking place, remains under heat wave warning after seeing tropical night on Tuesday. Tropical night occurs when overnight lows stay above 25 degrees. The World Scout Jamboree kicked off on Tuesday, bringing together around 43,000 young people from 158 countries. Participants will engage in various educational and cultural exchange programs over the next 10 days and cement friendship with members from diverse backgrounds, bridging racial, religious, and cultural divides. Dubbed the Cultural Olympics for Youth, the Jamboree is held every 4 years, and this marks the second World Jamboree hosted by South Korea after the first one in Gosong, Gangwon Province in 1991.
Again, it's all the more concerning because these are young kids, right? Teenagers who are going through this. And we were talking about this just yesterday, and this is, I believe, going to be extended until, not extended, it's going to go on until next week. And so big concerns in regards to this because a lot of the events that are taking place are outdoor activities. But here's the thing, though. As we've talked about, 36 degrees seems like peanuts compared to some of the other temperatures being reported in other parts of the world. And there's also very much volatile weather that we'll talk about in other parts. But nevertheless, speaking of the global heat waves, Haejung, do tell us how other countries are faring right now.
Apparently not so well. Starting off in Iran on Tuesday, the government announced a 2-day public holiday in response to the unprecedented heat exceeding 50 degrees Celsius, ordering all government agencies, banks, and schools to close amid soaring temperatures that threaten public health and strain the power grid. And moving on to the U.S., California's largest wildfire this year has swept across thousands of acres in the Mojave Desert since the weekend, which has been so powerful that it has been producing spinning columns of fire. The blaze, called the York Fire, began on Friday on private land in the New York mountain range of the Mojave National Preserve in San Bernardino County in southeastern California. There was also an out-of-control blaze burning in the northern Washington state, the Eagle Bluff Fire, which crossed the Canadian border and set off a cascade of evacuations over the last weekend in British Columbia.
Again, as I mentioned, it's clear that climate change is a critical factor in these weather-related catastrophes. So specifically, what kind of changes are we witnessing around the world, and what should we expect as well?
Well, for years, climate scientists have detailed again and again the many impacts that are likely as the world grows steadily hotter, such as more intense storm, more torrential rainfall, fast rising seas, and melting ice caps. In particular, rising sea surface temperatures in the North Atlantic and shrinking ice in Antarctica concern scientists. From the British Isles to the Newfoundland coast, North Atlantic temperatures have surged nearly beyond scientists' most extreme predictions, as much as 10 degrees Celsius warmer than normal last month. Now, not just the North Atlantic, but the global sea surface temperatures have risen about 0.15 degrees Celsius per decade, as the oceans have absorbed most of the warming that is a result of fossil fuel emissions and the greenhouse effect. And the average global temperature is estimated to be 1.1 degrees Celsius higher than it was before industrialization. According to the Washington Post, if the current global warming trends continue, they could eventually lead to coral reef die-offs, widespread sea level rise as glaciers shrink, and loss of important ecosystems like the Amazon rainforest, and much more devastating impacts that we'll all have to bear.
Yeah, certainly so. And we're reporting just ridiculous figures. Even, I believe, in China, in the Xinjiang region, they reported something like 52 degrees Celsius. We had one of our listeners, I believe, over in Nevada, who lives in Nevada, saying that something was it like 45 degrees Celsius was, I think, the weather that they had over there. Polina is saying she went on vacation to Valencia and reported 50 degrees. I was looking at the weather. Came back from London. London is going 19 degrees right now. 19, 22 degrees, 20 degrees, 17 degrees, which is, relatively cooler, which is, I guess, good. But you have a lot of these fluctuations. But we keep talking about these volatile weather patterns. And as Haejung mentioned, not only are we seeing high heat, but we're also seeing stronger storms, which is quite concerning, especially over in China, because at least 20 people were killed across Beijing and the nearby Hebei province because they had the typhoon Toksuri, bringing the heaviest rainfall in what they say is over 100 years. Don, fill us in on this.
Well, starting with Beijing, the death toll from the heavy rainstorm rarely seen in the Chinese capital has risen to 11, with 27 still unaccounted for. This marks Beijing's heaviest rainfall in more than 140 years, according to local authorities. The Beijing Flood Control and Drought Relief Headquarters said Tuesday that the toll included 4 deaths in Muntogo district, 4 in Changping, 2 in Fangshan, and 1 in Haidian district. Among the dead include rescuers who died during search operation and 2 high-ranking members of the Communist Party who were inspecting storm damage in affected towns. More than 44,000 people were affected in the city's 13 districts, and 127,000 people were evacuated, according to the government department responsible for flood control. Beijing's meteorological service said that an average of 260 millimeters of rain battered the city from Saturday. The torrential downpour submerged houses, buildings, facilities, and cars, while also cutting off mobile communications and electricity and suspending flights. Videos and pictures circulating on social media showed flooded roads and cars being swept away, and also a bridge that collapsed, succumbing to the heavy falls. The super typhoon Toksuri has also affected other parts of northern China, with at least 9 people dead in neighboring Hebei province, according to state broadcaster CCTV. More than 540,000 residents were affected by flooding, and more than 840,000 had relocated as of Tuesday afternoon, according to Hebei Flood Control Headquarters. President Xi Jinping called for a comprehensive search and rescue operation to save residents missing or trapped in floodwaters, and demanded that authorities minimize casualties from the disaster. Tropical storm Toksuri landed in China's southeastern coastal province of Fujian on Thursday and made its way north to parts of China that have rarely been hit by typhoons in the past. China's National Meteorological Center issued its first rainstorm red alert since 2011 on Saturday, the highest in the country's 4-tier weather warning system. The rainstorm warning was lowered to the 3rd level on Tuesday, but there is little relief, with another typhoon named Kanun is on the horizon. Typhoon Kanun packed winds of 220 kilometers per hour, the equivalent of a Category 4 Atlantic hurricane, as it passed Japan's southwestern Okinawa Islands early this morning. According to Japanese news outlets, the typhoon killed 1 and injured 35 others as of 4 p.m. this afternoon. Powers were down across over 200,000 households in the island. And the typhoon's outer bands could potentially bring heavy rainfall and high wind gusts over China's eastern Zhejiang province and along the coast near Shanghai in the next few days.
Yeah, again, from what I understand, I learned this for the first time today, that the northern parts of China, you do rarely see heavy rain, and which is why it impacted them so much. But the Typhoon Kanun is quite concerning, because what some of the weather experts are saying is that now that it hit Okinawa, they're trying to pan out the model of where it's going to hit next, and they're saying it's headed towards Shanghai. But after that, they just can't seem to kind of predict where the path of this typhoon is going to be. And again, this is a massive typhoon. And so you had some of the experts in like South Korea, the US, and even like some of the experts in Europe trying to predict. They all have a different model presented. And they're saying there is also a chance that it might hit South Korea. If it does hit South Korea, it's going to be coming as early as this weekend, as late as next week. And that certainly is something that we're trying to avoid here. We have Benny who says, in the Philippines, they have typhoon named Igay that causes rain in the Luzon region, especially in the Cagayan province. I hope everything is okay there, because all of this week you've been talking about the typhoon that has certainly impacted you there. Let's move on. One last piece of story to share with all of our listeners out there. We haven't really been talking too much about it, but it is developing and is turning quite serious over in Niger. France's foreign ministry began evacuating its citizens from Niger amid the anti-French sentiment following last week's coup. Now, the coup has prompted demonstrations against the former colonial power, with the French embassy coming under attack. Hye-jung, fill us in on this.
Right. Like you've said, the evacuations come amid an increasing anti-French sentiment, with coup supporters having gathered around the French embassy for days. European countries, including France, have begun evacuating their citizens from Niger, a West African country where a military coup has taken place. The coup leaders have also accused France of plotting a military intervention to reinstate ousted Niger President Mohamed Bazoum. Meanwhile, the military juntas in Burkina Faso and Mali have pledged support for the coup leaders. They said that any forcible attempt to reinstate Bazoum would be viewed as a declaration of war. As such, tensions in the region are also rising as neighboring countries react to warnings of possible military intervention by the West African community. France has sent 3 planes to an airport in the capital, Niamey, and is offering to help evacuate other European nationals. Germany has encouraged its citizens to take up the offer, and Italy is also organizing an evacuation flight. Spain's defense ministry also said today that it was preparing to evacuate more than 70 of its nationals in Niger by air. And currently, France, Italy, and Germany, along with the United States, have troops in Niger for military training and to combat Islamist militants. However, there have been no announcements from these countries that their troops will be withdrawing.
Yeah, so it's been over the past several years now, actually in the past decade, there has been so much conflict in West African countries. I mean, this is not the first time we've talked about a coup happening in a West African country. I feel like every year there's been some sort of military coup happening. And so, again, very concerning news, and all the more concerning because this has been happening for over a week now. And now we're covering this because it is really now getting out of control. And so another issue that we could keep a close tab on and keep you guys posted on this as well. Guys, thank you very much for coming in today with your reports despite the very, very hot weather. I hope you guys stay safe, stay cool, and we'll see you guys again.
Thank you.
You can listen to Korea Now with me, SJ Lee, by downloading the Arirang Radio application or tune in online by visiting www.arirangradio.com. So make sure you tune in Mondays through Fridays, 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. Korea time.